when you are an artist, what you actually are is a business owner. And I don't think people take that perspective on it often enough. And let me tell you, if you are any other kind of small business owner, whether you do your own books or whether you pay a bookkeeper and an accountant and a whoever to do your stuff, you still need to know enough to read your balance sheet and your profit and loss statement. And you need to understand the numbers enough to know if someone's fucking you over.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Same goes for musicians. If you are handing that task off to another person, that's fine. Let me tell you, most musicians are not numbers people.
I still struggle with it, right? So
that is, no problem. I get that. I don't argue that in the least, but it's honestly, the number of people that tell the story that you have just told.
Yeah.
What we can do to take care of ourselves is learn enough to know if we're getting screwed or being taken care of. Welcome to the Vocal Lab. I'm Sarah Ramsey, and this show aims to pull back the curtain on the entertainment industry, where veterans give up-and-coming artists some of the information they wish they'd had when they were just starting out. Sort of a music industry primer, if you will. Thanks for joining us today. Danny Craig is a songwriter and producer, mixer based outside of Vancouver, Canada. He is also a founding member of the multi-platinum rock group Default. As a writer, Danny plays an integral role in the co-creation of the ongoing Default catalog. And additionally, he co-writes with many of the artists he produces and has seen success on rock radio with bands like One Bad Son and Bonds of Mara. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
I think so.
Mara. In 2017, Danny scored big with writing the opening theme song for Nickelodeon's The Mysticons, and more recently has been writing for commercials and video games. You can hear more of Danny's work at www.dannycraig.com. So thanks for joining us today, Danny.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. It's lovely to be on here.
It is. It's funny. You and I have worked overlapping for a lot of years, but have spent very little time actually together.
Absolutely. Isn't it funny? Yeah. And hilariously, I just gave your name to somebody else today. So
bless you.
Right? There you go.
So this is actually great to kind of get to hang out a little bit together.
Definitely. Right. Well, I know we've both been around for a bit, and we've both got, children and long musical history and this and that and the other thing. So yeah, I bet you we've got tons in common that we don't know.
I think we probably do. Yeah. So tell us your story briefly for our listeners who might not know all the ins and outs of Danny Craig. Tell us a bit about who you are and your journey in the biz, how you got where you are today.
Well, I guess I've been in it for a little over 20 years now. So my band Default, we formed in 1999, and I was 19 years old. And things happened pretty quick for that. I mean, I'd been in a couple other bands before that. And, we had played with like Nickelback before they were signed, and the sort of Vancouver bigger bands at the time that all ended up getting record deals. And we sat down and we were like, okay, well, we want to make this serious. What do those guys do? Okay, well, obviously they take it a little more seriously. They do it every day for starters, right? And we're only get together a couple times a week. So, that
treat it like a job.
Isn't that interesting, right? What a notion. So that's kind of what we did. And we set out to just do it every day and got together. We all had our little 8-hour day shitty jobs back then. And we would get together after work for a couple, 3-4 hours and jam and write. And we put it together pretty quick. And it started actually with myself and our guitar player, Jeremy. We were in a band together before, and we left that band to start Default, or to start the serious band. Right. So as we were starting that, Dallas, who was, we didn't actually know he could sing. He was just our buddy at that point and would come out to shows, and, we drink together and stuff. Right. He was one of our, and then out of nowhere, he's like, yeah, can I try out? Like,
little did you know.
And then of course, he comes and can rock everyone's socks off. And I mean, he had a bit of a history of like, he was a car singer, right? So he was also, that's funny, used to singing kind of expressionless in the car. So no one kind of sees what he's doing, right? But, and his mom was a singer. So he definitely had, vocals in the house early on. And anyway, point is, the guy could sing. So we formed Default there. Dave, our bass player, joined shortly after. And then from, the inception in 99, we were signed a year later. It was only probably 4 months into the inception of the band that we put a little demo together and got it to Joey Moy, who was our friend, of course, from back then. And he passed it on to Chad. And this is before Silver Side Up came out. So before they exploded, but they had still that Leader of Men record in Canada. So, I think it was in the US too. But anyway, Chad heard it and was like, holy shit, where'd you guys find this guy? And then, pretty shortly after, we put a plan together, and Dallas's dad, who's not a rich man by any means, pulled 20 grand out of his RSPs and paid for us to do a record way back
Bless
then.
him.
Right. So that record we made in December of 99. So really soon after forming the band. And then Chad introduced us to John Simpkin, and then he helped us. John, of course, shopped us around, and then Chad helped a little bit too by getting Roadrunner to come see us. And anyway, within 6 months, we were showcasing for, half a dozen labels and getting offers on the table. And then finally, probably a year after the band was formed, we signed our deal. And then it took still another year for the album to come out, for the release to happen. And then there was a period in there where the label wanted to beef up the record a little bit. So they sent us down to Seattle for 2 weeks to work with a producer named Rick Parisher, who did Pearl Jam 10 and Blind Melon, Temple of the Dog. And that was sort of the first guy who'd done big records that we really were into. The first time we got to work with a guy like that. And that was pretty cool, pretty special. And then that session was where Wasting My Time came out of. And of course, Wasting My Time was our first single and our biggest song by a long stretch kind of thing. I think we put out 14 singles over 4 records. But nothing touched that one. And that one, propelled the first album to platinum in Canada and the US and kept us on the road for 2 years, pretty solid, until we were able to get off and make the next record. And that was kind of a whirlwind, that 2001 to 2002 where all that happened. And then, things kind of settled, and we carried on touring throughout the 2000s, right? Till 2010-ish.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when, we had gone through a whole bunch of stuff. We had gone through our label going bankrupt and delaying our 4th record coming out by 2 years. And we had all sorts of problems with their, marketing, and, for how big the song was, we had people coming up to us all the time. Well, I didn't know that was you guys. And try and find your record. And it wasn't in the store, and this just shenanigans. Right. So, but, we still had a really great, great experience and a great career for that matter. Right. So, but that kind of wound down there in the end of the 2000s. And, we kind of, we had kind of exhausted all the shows we could do. And we were like, okay, well, let's just take some time away. And that's when, of course, Dallas went off to try his hand at some country songs. And I got heavier into producing, although I started producing in 2003. So, it was 2 years after our first record came out. So we had already had like the platinum album, sort of cred. Right. And, a buddy of mine just asked out of the blue, hey, would you want to come produce my band? I said, well, sure. I got a basic idea how that works. So I hired an engineer and went in there with him, and we made the record, and I had a lot of fun in that role. And I remember just, thinking to myself, this is great. I kind of like doing this, it's similar to, being the drummer in Default. And I definitely played a heavy hand in arrangements and stuff like that with Default. And that's a big thing about producing, right? Is kind of, getting the song to flow and getting the right hooks in the right spots and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of took to it, and I started producing more and more and more. And in 2007, I built a home studio that I was able to, do quite a bit out of. And then this one I'm sitting in now, I moved into in 2018, built this one out. That definitely took over more focus once, Default wound down a little bit. And it's, in my bio, I mentioned One Bad Son. That's when we did that record. And that ended up being the 9th most played rock record on radio in Canada. So that was kind of a fun, first sort of, that was like the first record too that I produced, and when it was done and mixed, I was like, okay, well, this is kind of what, this is what I was hoping for. I'm happy with it. I'm not upset with anything here, right? So, and then ever since then, luckily, it's been that way, and and then things really kind of took off from there. Working with a lot of bands and getting radio play in Canada with various groups, and writing as well. In the bio there, it mentions that cartoon I wrote a theme song for called the Mysticons, and that also kind of came out of nowhere from my publisher, and it was like a submission thing. I submitted it, they liked it, blah blah blah. And then then I started doing a little more of that, writing for this and that, and a couple commercials, and over COVID, a video game approached myself and Dave, my bass player, who's actually my partner in a couple other businesses, which we'll get to. Yeah. And that's a lot of long-winded story there, but I guess it's sort of step by step on all that happening. And of course, with Default in 2018, we went back out. We did a, reunited, if you will, not that we ever broke up, but we reunited, did a tour with Seether and Stone Temple Pilots across Canada. And that was fantastic because we hadn't played together in 7 or 8 years. And so getting out on the road together was a lot of fun, and putting that together, and the tour went really great. And I think the time off was probably a good thing for both us and both for people who wanted to see us, because we were away for a while, so people wanted to see us again, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. It sort of reinvigorates the audience, right?
It does. And then ever since, of course, we had COVID, so that kind of put a little bit of a wrench in the whole reuniting of things. But we've done a handful of shows, each year since, and hopefully when the world gets even more back into the swing of all that, we'll get some more out of it. So.
Right on.
That's about the story in a nutshell.
Wow, there's lots to unpack there.
Definitely.
Let's start by, so we were talking before we hit record, and we were talking about, so here on the show, on the Vocal Lab, the aim is to kind of shine a light on the music industry through the lens of what I know now that I wish I'd known then, to make the information more readily available for up and coming artists who maybe don't even know what they don't know yet. Right? Yeah. Because all of us were in those shoes at one point in time. So with that in mind, if you were starting your career over again, what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? Well, I could tell you that we'll start with the things that really, I think, mattered in a positive way was the regimented, daily rehearsal, working with the band, even just playing your own instrument every day. Yep. Not here and there, right? You got to play every single day if you want to be good. And, and I don't mean like whatever, a Joe Satriani good. I mean, just good enough to not fuck up on stage, really, right? Really, you got to do that. You got to play every day. So, one of those things was, it was a 5-day-a-week rehearsal schedule we had, and I would definitely not change that. Delegation's really important. Not having one guy who's booking the gigs and doing your social media and talking to whomever and ordering CDs and ordering merch and doing all that shit, and then getting just pissed off that no one else is helping them out, right? So, a big thing would be delegating everything, and making sure everyone has a job or two that they're going to be able to do well, and it's going to work great for the whole machine of it, right?
And maybe within that, this is your life we're talking about, not mine. But if I can throw in within that, I think it's important to look at whose skills are best suited to which jobs as well.
100%.
So you're not getting the guy who's completely tech, like a non-tech guy, to be your social media guy.
Exactly. Or the totally uninteresting guy in the band to be your social media guy.
Right. Yeah. So match the jobs to the skills.
100%. Yeah.
But delegate. Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah. Those things. Writing, put a big priority on writing. I mean, and I run into this still with every artist kind of does it. Oh, hey, we got 10 songs. We want to make a record.
Awesome. You need 30.
Usually what the pros do. Exactly. You need a bunch more and you pick the best one. So spending that time on writing and really putting a focus on writing. And I mean, I still tell the bands that I work with now, if you can, it's important when you're rehearsing for a show, make that the priority. But, it sometimes sucks just doing that 5 days a week. So maybe there's a day where you do write, or there's a jam period or whatever, change it up a little bit, but do focus on writing. One of the things that we didn't do when we blew up on the first record is we went on tour and we played our asses off, but then we kind of partied a lot and didn't go back to the bus and like, hey, you got an idea? Let's smash something out. Right. Didn't have any demo rigs or nothing on the bus, even though it was a little before the unbox. It was still could have had something going on. Right. And we were a little lazy in that department. And I think our second album suffered. So you definitely want to put that emphasis on writing as many songs as you can, even if they're tidbits, even if they're just a verse, chorus, or whatever. Bank those up and have as many as you can. And then even if you don't know what to do with them, when you meet with your producer for your next album, they can go, oh, that's gold, that's gold, that's gold.
Yep.
They can, you can get some help with that, because it's tough being in it like that. So yeah, that would be one thing. What else would I do different? It's important, I think, to have a fund. If everyone can, put aside whatever they can per month. If you start, even if 4 guys are putting $25 each and it's $100 a month going away in the inception of the band, well, 6 months, you got $600 to spend on something, or to demo your stuff, or to, even more so. If you could put more away, that would be a good thing. But those are a few. You were going to say something?
I love that, actually. Way back in the day, a million years ago, prior to Mariana's Trench being Mariana's Trench, it was Ramsey Fiction, and I actually played in the band for a period of time.
Right on.
And at that point in time, what we did was all, like, any shows that we played, the income that we made, I mean, you're making shit money, but you're making something, right? Yep. $100 for the band for the night or whatever it is. But that money, nobody got paid out. And I mean, we all agreed on that.
Yeah.
But that all went into a band account, and it was the same purpose, to save up for being able to do demos or do whatever. So it's however you fund it, one way or the other, whether it's through working your shows or whether it's through actually putting cash in out of your own pocket, or a combo both thereof.
I would say do absolutely both. Yeah. Yeah. That's super important. Reinvest always. And then even think about, that money's good for, obviously, what it can be used for is going on tour, or ordering merch or CDs or whatever have you. But it can also be, you can also think about how to reinvest in yourself and how do we step our band up from the other bands we're playing with? Maybe it's investing in a couple this is local band level. You invest in a couple little light rigs that, only going to be on your show. You're going to look a little cooler than the other band. Or maybe, if money's tight, but you've got some fundage in the band account, maybe the band needs a bit of a look, some outfits or something. There's all sorts of, as we call it, production that you could
totally production value, right?
Yeah.
So that also kind of answers the next question, which is usually, what did you do right in your career? And you sort of answered that simultaneously. So let's talk about what have been. This is less about the specific people and more about just the relationships. What have been the most important relationships in your career?
It's interesting because we've had a few people that we thought were quite influential, or that we thought were quite important to us, that turned out to be backstabbers. So, that's interesting, right? Definitely. I think first and foremost, your internal relationship probably with the other people in your band. I mean, you all should probably love each other and get along and hang out together and do stuff together and, be a good cohesive unit. There's definitely, some crew guys that we had for long periods of time that we really came to consider family and definitely relied on quite a bit. But we had a business manager that we thought was great, but then found out then he died of a liver failure. Didn't tell anybody that was happening, but I mean that whatever, family, whatever reasons, we felt all bad. But then we began to find out as they went through all our books and yada yada that he had been stealing from us and it didn't cash. There was like 60 grand in uncashed checks, and there was this and that, and we owed the government money, and oh my god, like, it was a whole thing. Basically, we didn't see a royalty for 4 or 5 years as a result. I think even longer, actually, most of the 2010s there, because it all went to paying back just shit that he fucked up, right? So that, I guess, is a lesson in being real careful. But, you know, it's funny, like, we didn't just find this guy out of nowhere. He was even recommended by our management, and he had other clients, and you just never know. You know, one of the things I tell because I tend to like try and offer as much advice and, you know, try and help develop everyone I work with, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I tell everybody is that there's not a single person working in the music industry that is certified to do whatever the hell they claim to do.
Yeah.
There's no diploma on the wall or shit like that, right? So it's like, yeah, you really got to watch it and be careful.
Well, and I think I don't think people realize that when you are an artist, what you actually are is a business owner. And I don't think people take that perspective on it often enough. And let me tell you, if you are any other kind of small business owner, whether you do your own books or whether you pay a bookkeeper and an accountant and a whoever to do your stuff, you still need to know enough to read your balance sheet and your profit and loss statement. And you need to understand the numbers enough to know if someone's fucking you over.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Same goes for musicians. If you are handing that task off to another person, that's fine. Let me tell you, most musicians are not numbers people.
I still struggle with it, right? So
that is, no problem. I get that. I don't argue that in the least, but it's your, like, honestly, the number of people that tell the story that you have just told.
Yeah.
What we can do to take care of ourselves is learn enough to know if we're getting screwed or being taken care of.
Definitely. Right. And it goes even beyond that. I mean, we, obviously we had management at the time that was getting commission and, looking at numbers and books, and well, they didn't see it either, and I don't know how hard they were looking, mind you, but yeah, it's, you do, there's people that you think you trust, and even that even people that you do trust that are trustworthy, but they're just fuck ups like you, like the musician, right? And then something gets screwed up, and it's when you're dealing with big business. It can really bite you in the butt.
Yep. Absolutely.
So definitely good advice.
Yeah, for sure. Any other important relationships in your career
there was definitely some radio people. Yes, definitely some radio people that we got to know well and would, see every time we came into town. And that was, I mean, it definitely, I think it still is to a degree, but it definitely was a huge, a very important factor is to have relationships at radio. That's something that, we learned from the people that we were working around, but Nickelback was the perfect example of that, where Chad quit his job and basically became the band's radio tracker and made relationships with every program director across the country. That's a huge thing. Those were huge. So there was definitely some people that championed for us and whatnot. The agents that we had Ralph James as an agent, Nick Minema, and both of them are awesome, right? They're both killer. They both care about, us, not just how much money's and whatever else. Right. So,
it's a big distinction.
Yes, it is a big distinction. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think our management cared about us too. They were maybe just not as competent as they came across.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, Label our A&R guy actually who signed us. We still talk to him to this day. Of course, everyone else at the label, there was lots of good people there, but there was like the high ups were not cool, right? So, that relationship eventually soured, and it is what it is. But it wasn't us. It was definitely them. Their relationship's ours with everybody. So,
yeah,
you know.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the transition from, and I know it wasn't like just this box, that box, and that's all there was, but the sort of transition from being a performer, a drummer, over to working in the production side, and how you learned to use your skills as a producer. And, you touched on it, telling your origin story there, but you want to take a little deeper dive into that? Yeah.
So, I mean, when I started out, I didn't go to, a school or nothing like that. I went to the school of going and working with actual producers and whatnot. Right?
Yeah.
So that was obviously that was huge, because that allowed me to be privy to those working environments and those type of, that kind of quality and what's expected. And, and it still has taken me years, and I'm still obviously getting better, but just to develop, my ears and my taste and all that kind of stuff. But when I started, it was sort of, because of the producers that we worked with. Obviously at that point I'd worked with Chad and Rick. And then we did our second album with Rick again in Seattle. They're both of them are obviously big song guys. And in fact, every producer we've ever worked with were song guys. Right. And I think that is something that really, most of the big successful producers happen to be song guys. I think there's plenty that aren't, but I mean, a lot of them are.
Explain what you mean by that term.
Right. Somebody who is more focused on how good and accessible the song is than maybe other things like, well,
how many notes the singer can sing.
Sure, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Right.
How fancy and hard it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So focusing on the material and making sure that is great. And, even all the peers that I have that I look up to here locally that are my good friends, such as Mike Richter and Garth Richardson and, guys like that. The producer we did our last two records, Bob Marlette, down in LA. Yep. The answers are all when I was asking some of those burning questions, the answers are all quite similar, right? It's, is it a good song?
Yeah.
Is the song any good? Right. That's really it. That's really it.
Yep.
And it trumps all. It trumps everything else. You can have a shitty mix and you can have a whatever crappy snare drum and whatever. It doesn't matter. Is the song great? The song's great. That's going to translate. Right. So anyway, that's really what I took from that and focused on that, having some songwriting background and having been able to work with guys like Chad, learning songwriting from him. I mean, he's a master, right? So
yes, he is. So
I picked up, I'm sure 90% of what I know about, writing pop songs from that guy. Right. That slowly I started to learn the engineering side. So at the beginning, I hired an engineer that I actually ended up working with for probably 7 or 8 years. Slowly throughout that, we'd be like, yeah, you got to tune some vocals. And he'd be like, well, you do them. Why don't you learn how to do them? Okay, I'll learn how to do them, And then eventually I learned how to do everything and I didn't need them anymore. So,
yeah.
So that's kind of how that happened. And of course, we're all for the longest time working with lower budgets and more compact, home studio setups and this and that you kind of have to do everything, until you can afford to pay a bunch of people on it. But yeah, so I picked up everything. I picked up engineering. I picked up mixing. I definitely sponged it because I've turned into an audio geek here. I definitely enjoy, soundscape and putting together a mix and making something sound big and punchy and ripping and whatever. Right. So that all turns me on. So, once I kind of figured out, once I learned the fundamentals and how to do everything, then it was really all about developing taste and coming up with sort of the things that I like and the way I like to do things. That's kind of the place I'm at now, which is, I think I'm stoked on where I'm at now and I'm excited to keep getting better. But I'm at a good place now where I can I'm not concerned about any gig I'm taking or any genre or any whatever, even though I think I'm strongest probably in the rock or even the more real instrument genre, I would call it, over like the electronica side. I just don't listen to a lot of it. So I'm not fresh with that, but I think I'm kind of fresh with rock and sort of shit like that. Right. So, so that's where I feel strongest, but I'm pretty good going in any situation now, being able to, it doesn't matter what gear is there or whatever, it's pretty easy. Right. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. So like thinking of this sort of through the eyes of an up and coming artist who doesn't necessarily know all the things yet, do you want to explain how an artist, a producer, and an engineer work together successfully on a project, kind of what each of their roles really looks like, and the different facets of the roles? Someone who doesn't understand what a producer does or where the artist and the producer collaborate. Yes.
Okay. Well, and that actually can work on so many different levels, because you do get the producers that aren't necessarily the song guys, who are more about, whatever, the tones or the this or the that, and they're going to focus on different things. So depending on what you want out of, now this is another loaded question or whatever, because asking an artist what they want when they don't know what they want is pretty difficult. Right. But, you can either, you do get two different kinds of artists. You got the artists that kind of think they've got it all figured out. They don't really want much input. They just want to go and record their songs the way they are. Yeah. And that's it. If that's the kind of artist you feel like you are, you're probably not looking for a producer. You're probably just looking for an engineer. Now, that's not to say that I don't think a band like that could benefit from a producer. I think everyone should use a producer if you want your stuff to be, better than you can make it, right? Because, that's the adage too, is, as an artist, you make a record. Well, nowadays it's more than every 2 years, but still you make a record only so often. And when you're a producer engineer, you make records all the time, every day. Yep. So that right there sort of should tell you that, okay, he's probably gonna get it better than I will, but then again, it's all about, maybe it's a little bit about credentials. If I encourage everyone to go listen to, when they're scouting out a producer and engineer, go listen to some of their stuff and just make sure you're happy with it. Or if, that a lot of research isn't done. A lot of people are just looking at deals and, oh, you'll do it for $500. Oh, sweet. And then you've just pissed away that $500 on a, unless it's a great song. I guess I'm shooting myself in the mouth here, but right.
But if it's someone,
enough, maybe the $500 recording's fine. But
but I think you're right. Like if it's someone who, I think every producer has their style, their kind of sound, their whatever. And if, as an artist, if you don't do your homework, if you don't go listen to their stuff, you could end up with something that is not what you were going for.
Right.
Ultimately, you could end up with something that is a surprising, fabulousness, but you're rolling the dice if you don't do your homework beforehand.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great way of putting it. Yeah. So now if you are the artist who does write a ton of songs and you got all this material, you don't know what to do with it, but you want to make some music. Well, that's definitely where the producer comes into play. So, when I'm working with an artist, I ask for demos. I ask for everything. Don't send me your guitar player's collection of riffs. Make sure there's words on them and make sure that there's some semblance of a song. But send me everything. I'll happily go through it and listen to it all and tell you what I like best. And then we have a conversation about, of course, budget always comes into play, how many songs you want to record. But just that, what songs are we working on? Do we have the material? Do we need to write more? Whatever have you. So from that point, if you're working with a producer, it's the producer's job usually to go and book everything for you, book the studio, book the engineer. Now the engineer, we'll get to that in a second, but book the drum tech, book, whatever, right? Just make sure all that kind of stuff is handled and tickety booed, right? So, I guess if you think of it like a ship, the producer's like the captain. Right. He's sort of calling the shots. And then the engineer is like the skipper. He's driving the boat. So the engineer is the one who knows all the equipment, knows the room ideally, is a good engineer with his taste and sounds and abilities, and can, get the drums mic'd and whipped up, in a short period of time, and keep everything moving. And so that's generally what an engineer does. And of course, we do also live in the day and age of one guy doing it. Also, in my case, I'm both producer and engineer. So I'm sitting at the desk the whole time, as well as, working with the band prior to the sessions, with working on their songs in the pre-production, and then in the studio working on their performances, coaching their performances, especially with vocalist, and then onto the editing and mixing of the project. And so basically I have to do all of that, to make a living, right? And that's typically, I guess those are the roles. But yeah, the producer role is just that. They're almost like that fifth member, or whatever, however many people are in your band, that extra member that you're bringing in, who's able to sift through the shit for you and help you steer the boat, help you get to the end, help you make that record, right?
Yep. And as a producer, what would you like artists to know before working with you? Like, what is the best way they can prep for their time with you that'll give you the best final product? What's their responsibility? Right.
Certainly. Well, I would say probably just those band habits we were talking about. If they are everyday players, and if they are writing all the time, that's most of the battle won, right? If they, one thing that some guys don't do for sure is knowing your parts before you come into the studio. There can be wiggle room, but I do get some guys come in like, oh, I don't really have a way of playing it. I play it this way, and then, okay, well, let's do the next take, and it's played a whole totally different way. And it's like, okay, man, well, we gotta hone in here.
Make some choices.
Yeah. Let's make some decisions. So knowing what you're going to do. And I mean, I'm extreme with that. I go in when I would play drums on a record, I'm going in and playing the same take, however many times the producer wants me to, this exact same part, the same fills, because I've thought about it all and I've written it all. And if somebody wants me to change something, that's easy to do. But the point is, I'm going in fully prepared with a part fully written. That I'm, 90% sure is going to be the part, right? So that would be a big thing.
Question there, I want you actually to finish that whole thought, but do you feel the same way specific to singers on that point as you do with the rest of the instrumentation, about it being the same every time?
A little, well, yes and no. Definitely a little bit less. Again, I was, with me, I'm a little extreme on that, right? I like, vibe is a hugely important thing when recording music. And, even with a vocalist, often I'll just let them do a take or two on their own before I start giving them too much instruction, start getting their brain working too much and having to think about too much stuff. Right. And then hopefully by the end of whatever, it all depends. If the singer comes in and knows his stuff or her stuff, whoever, and they smash it out, it could even be one take, but it's a couple, three maybe. But sometimes I'll need to go, 5, 6, 7 takes. And it's usually it's usually the first 2 takes and the last 2 takes that end up being where I take most of the stuff, most of the parts from, because, you've got the vibe in the first 2, and then you've got all your good enunciation and whatever points you were trying to get the singer to cover in the last 2 there. So, I definitely, I encourage the vibe. I encourage, if something hits you, try it out, right? If you feel like throwing in a or a grunt or whatever, try it to see whatever, right? Not saving lives, just making rock music, However, that being said, melody and cadence is big for me in the vocals. And I think, ironing certain things out or making things bop off the 1 and 2, off the quarter note vibe, right? Making things kind of bop around a little bit. And then once we get that, delivering it the same way a couple of times. That's important. But it's in terms of their sort of intensity or their emoting or whatever, that's a vibe thing, right? You kind of got to be in the moment for some of that stuff. So I guess it's kind of a balance.
Yep. Anything else you'd want artists to know before or have prepped?
Right. Coming in, knowing your parts, having enough songs. I guess in the situation where you're working with a song guy producer, being open to the criticism and the not criticism, being open to the suggestions and the changes. I mean, honestly, you know, it doesn't rarely gets to this point, but it's like, well, if you're not going to listen to me, then why are we even here? Right. You know, why are we doing this? I'm not here to record your, you know, mediocre ideas. I'm here to make them better. And if you don't agree with that, that's cool. But we probably shouldn't be working together if that's the case, right? So there's that. Yeah, I guess it's being open and understanding that, ideally, hopefully trusting that producer you're working with and understanding that they've been around, they've done some shit, and they've probably got some pretty good ideas, and you know, roll with it.
And for clarity's sake, are you expecting someone to come in and take 100% of your ideas, or is that still a give and take process, understanding that you have some expertise and what you're saying holds some weight and is worthwhile, but it's also that's that person's project and idea. So there's probably a balance. Yeah,
I pick my battles. So if I think it's important enough, I'll stand by it, and I probably won't let it go. But definitely, if it's something I don't feel is going to make or break, it's not a make or break for me, and they want it one way, then I'm totally fine with it. Like, it's often like something at the end of a song. Oh, I want to do this or that. And I'm like, fuck, we're at the end. If somebody made it all the way to the end, great. Right? Do whatever you want. But certainly if it's like a big hook, or if it's some, you know, I like to go down to this sour, shitty sounding note. It's like, no, you know, that's stay on the one note. We'll put harmonies. They'll sound great. Just do it. Trust me. Certainly. I pick my battles, depending on how important whatever it is to me. So, but I'm selfish. I'll come on. Yeah. That's I think that's why we're here. It's why we're here. Right. So, you know, we're here to make a good record, but you're here to listen to, you know, what I got to say about it. So that's kind of it's a big thing. That's a big thing. And again, if that's not something that the artist feels like they're into, well, then that's all they need to do is go into a studio for a day and have an engineer make them sound as best they can. Right.
Thanks for joining us today. That was actually just part 1 of our interview. And I would love it if you come on back Thursday to catch part 2. Can't wait to see you then.